In recognition of Memorial Day, we have the honor of talking to someone who, was engaged in World War II, did in fact serve with those who did give the ultimate sacrifice, the sacrifice of their lives. An individual who, quite frankly, can speak to the issue of the immensity of the war, beyond just the recognized start of the war being December 7th, but actually having been engaged in the war in a tangential fashion. He was a sailor aboard the Coast Guard cutter Alexander Hamilton, and was engaged in, the protection of the Liberty ships that were providing service and supplies to the Allies, the European Allies at that time, prior to the actual declaration of war. And we have him in studio, Hugh Salter. And with that, Hugh, again, thanks for taking the time to be with us this afternoon. Appreciate that.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Also on the line, joining us, Richard Snow, the author of A Measureless Peril, America in the Fight for the Atlantic, the Longest Battle of World War II. And I was not aware of it. I heard Ben Ball's interview of him last week, and when I was listening to the interview, I said, I got to get Hugh Salter into the studio to chat with our guest, Richard Snow, author of A Measureless Peril. Again, America in the Fight for the Atlantic, the Longest Battle of World War II. And with that, Richard, welcome to Viewpoints. Thank you, sir, for taking the time to be with us this afternoon.
Well, thank you very much for having me, and I'm very honored to meet, as it were, Mr. Salter.
Yes, in spite of the fact that it's via phone, welcome, Mr. Salter, Mr. Snow, Mr. Salter.
Thank you.
Nice meeting you.
It's interesting, Richard, we'll get into the more details of your background here in a few moments, but first I just want to chat with folks and tell them the experience of meeting you also via phone a few moments ago. I informed you of Mr. Salter's involvement in the interview, and I said to you, he served aboard the Coast Guard cutter Alexander Hamilton. And your remark really caught me by surprise. And your response was?
Well, I think I elegantly said "Holy cow!" and didn't the Hamilton sink a U-boat?
And as a matter of fact, I was talking to Hugh Salter about that earlier. Hugh, did you not? Did the Alexander Hamilton, was it credited with sinking a U-boat?
No.
It was not.
The Campbell was.
The Campbell was.
Yes, yeah.
But I thought
another sister ship.
I thought that there was a.
I thought you were in the. I thought you were in the same action with the Campbell.
We were in the action with them, but we were torpedoed off of Iceland, 1940, January 29th.
Oh my
42. Goodness! First warship torpedoed after the war started. I had been in over a year at that point.
Interesting. Well, I thought, and I apologize, Hugh. I thought that in fact they had finally given credit to the Alexander Hamilton for that U-boat sinking. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about this whole aspect. Richard, I'm going to start with you. Interesting story about your father. Let's talk about how you got involved in this book and what precipitated.
Well, my father had been an architect before the war started. And he was like the millions of other Americans who left a safe and known career for an extremely unsafe and challenging one during those war years. But in some ways he was a little different because he was older than most. He was born in 1905. He was old for active service, but the Navy certainly needed people who knew about structure, and they gave him a nice uniform and a great job. He lived in New York. He just had to go out on the subway every few days and inspect shore positions and make sure the fire points were in the right place, and come home and sleep in his own house with his wife of 7 months. And he hated it because he got embarrassed by taking salutes from sailors back from the real Atlantic convoy runs. And he finally said to my mother, "Look, I feel like a fraud. I really want to try and get to sea." And she wasn't crazy about this idea, but she understood. But she said, "Here's the deal. Okay, but you write me every day you're away." And he came. He had some very busy days, but he came awful close to fulfilling this. And they're good letters. And they tell the process of that so many went through. They're an interesting reflection of how you changed your life and take up this demanding new career. But the more I read about what he was doing out there in the Atlantic, the more and more I realized how far back this story went. That it really that he came in at the end of it, like so many other Americans. But the Navy, our Navy, was out there in the Atlantic, as Mr. Salter well knows, long before Pearl Harbor.
And of course, that was related to the Lend-Lease program and the escorts that were providing service to the Liberty ships and to all the commercial vessels that were providing service to Europe. It is interesting, though, how many people don't look at that experience and recognize either the value, sadly, but more importantly also the great courage that it took to serve aboard these escort vessels. And I think there was one poignant moment in here. You mentioned going to something about he was never in harm's way or something of that nature. Looking at this, while he unpacked in Brownsville, my father reviewed his role in the event for my mother, then added with what seemed to me an impressive mildness, "That's just considered having been in action."
Yeah, well, yes, that was what my the super of our building was telling about how he'd taken part in the invasion of Sicily and the landings on Sicily,
right.
And my mother, after this was over, put sort of a protective forearm on my father's arm and said, "Oh, I'm so glad Dick was never in action." And then the super went off, and my father explained that his sister ship 1,500 yards away from him had split in half and sunk, taking 115 men to their deaths, and that he'd been in the 8-hour pursuit of the submarine, that successful pursuit of the submarine that had sunk it. And then he said, very mildly, Emma, that's generally considered having been in action. But, what she said was not ridiculous because very few people consider the Atlantic War as a single battle. You think of a naval battle as, like Midway, where two great fleets clash and stuff gets decided in minutes or hours. This was almost 6 years long, and it was, it might also be called 1,000 little battles, but it was one long campaign of us trying to get food and supplies and munitions and later troops safely to England, and the German Navy doing everything it could, which was plenty, to keep them from getting there. The Germans weren't interested particularly in sinking our warships. They wanted to sink our tankers and our merchant ships and starve England out.
Interesting story. And by the way, I want to commend you on that. Richard Snow, our guest, the author of A Measureless Peril, America in the Fight for the Atlantic, the Longest Battle of World War II, and of course a battle that resonated here in coastal North Carolina because so many of those ships were torpedoed off our coast.
Right off the coast here, yes.
And Hugh, let's
right to your shores, yes.
Absolutely. Hugh Salter served aboard the Coast Guard cutter Alexander Hamilton, himself a survivor from a torpedo attack. We'll talk in a few minutes about those friends of yours that you lost in that attack. Hugh, when the escort duty began for the Coast Guards, and a lot of people are not aware that the Coast Guard sort of morphs in time of battle and becomes part of the Department of Defense. But in your service as a Coast Guardsman, how many other Coast Guard ships were engaged in providing escort service? Most people think of it purely the Navy, but the Coast Guard did it too.
Well, actually the Navy took us over.
Right.
It's put in the Declaration of War. And there was 7 of these ships built under the same diagram, so to speak.
Tell us something about the
They were big ships. I mean, but the word cutter might make them sound small, but these were big Treasury class ships, weren't they?
326 foot.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's a lot of ship.
Oh yeah. Teakwood decks.
How many men served aboard the ship, Hugh?
Our complement was 213. I think there was about 203 on at the time, and we were torpedoed.
And what was your job aboard the cutter?
I was striking for gunner's mate at the time.